Every so often in pro wrestling circles, you might hear the legend of Dr. Death, a man whose career seems built on fable. Known as one of the legitimate tough men of the sport, Steve is one of the rare foreign pro wrestlers to achieve main event success in Japan, which saw him climb to the top of the mountain in All Japan Pro Wrestling. On July 24th, 1994, he would capture the All Japan Pro Wrestling Triple Crown Championship after defeating Michiharu Misawa. Today, though, it seems Dr. Death is more remembered by wrestling fans for his terrible run in the WWF in the late 90s, notably his involvement in the embarrassing Brawl for All angle, which saw the WWF showcase a horrendous tough man boxing tournament, which had apparently been created solely for Dr. Death at the behest of Jim Ross to prove Williams' legitimate toughness against hapless WWF low and mid-card workers. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned, as Bart Gunn knocked Dr. Death out in the early stages of the tournament. While this should have been proof enough to Steve that perhaps real fighting wasn't his thing, he would give it one more go-round, this time in Japan. This fight happened at K1 Beast in Niigata on March 24th of 2004, an event that saw K1 once again mix their usual kickboxing exhibitions with MMA-styled fights, as K1 at the time had been putting more focus on featuring MMA bouts on select cards, a forced result from a fractured partnership with once friendly turned rival promotion Pride Fighting Championships. Dr. Death's opponent for the fight seemed an extremely dubious choice, Alexey Ignashov, a Belarusian world champion Muay Thai kickboxer who had a knack for knocking out opponents. This choice only makes sense if you consider Alexey's lack of MMA experience. He had only one prior MMA fight, which was a no-contest bout against another pro wrestler, one you might be familiar with, Shinsuke Nakamura. And so, fight fans, we will answer the age-old question. Can a pro wrestler overcome the odds? Can sheer toughness alone carry a man to victory? We shall soon learn the answers to those questions in today's episode of MMA Oddities. Hello, fight fans! It's me, the most dangerous man alive today, back with more odd MMA action. And you know what? Why don't we just press play here and get this going? Pressing play right now. Oh, I gotta turn this down. Oh, yeah. There he is, Dr. Death. I mostly know Dr. Death from not his WWF stint in the late 90s that most people seem to remember, but for his equally terrible stint in WCW, which saw Ed Ferrara play a Jim Ross-like character called Oklahoma. There was much hype behind Steve Williams, and he was a legitimate badass. And he did have a pretty good career, more so in Japan than he did in America. There's his opponent, Alexey, Belarusian Muay Thai kickboxer. Yeah, his knees. He's knocked out a couple guys at this point in Muay Thai kickboxing with knees. There's one right there. Speak of the devil! There you go. Alexey for this fight was 26 years old, and Dr. Death, meanwhile, was... I gotta get back. I don't have it written down. Steve, actually, he looks a lot older than he was. He was, well, actually, no. I take that back. He was 43 years old at the time here, so... But he's got that weathered, sort of tough man face on him, where he could be 27 years old, he could be 60 years old. It's really hard to tell. There he is. What language do they speak in Belarus? Is it Russian, Ukrainian, or is it their own language? I don't know. The most famous Belarusian, or is it Belarusian? For me, it will always be Andrei Arlovsky. I was a huge Andrei Arlovsky mark. I still am a mark for him today, even though he did, when he came back and he was his this last stint in the last stint in the UFC. I was marking out. He was doing good, and then he kind of fell off the cliff there and returned to I guess mediocrity. You know, he was UFC champion before heavyweight champion. At the time, no, UFC heavyweight division was really fucking shit. Being carried by Randy Couture and Tim Sylvia. So yes, K1 Beast. This is just one of the many K1 events that were featuring MMA. Mostly spectacle MMA bouts. And there's Steve Williams. He was, I guess you could say, super popular in Japan for his stint in the 90s. Here he just kind of looks old. He looks kind of battered down. He's not really moving that well. He's kind of hobbling almost. I'm sure he has knee problems. But look at the mug on him. Holy fuck, he does look like he would kick your ass and then have sex with your girlfriend right in front of you at a bar. Like, no stopping. He'd kick your ass and then go right to fucking your girlfriend right in front of you. Using your tears as lubricant. Iconic looks, you could say. I mean, he's one of those guys that face, you know, kind of acting weird here. The fuck is up with the tongue? I'm a Steve Williams fan. There's some people that are hardcore Steve Williams fan. Me, not so much. I mean, like I said, my only real exposure with him was in WCW, you know, in the late 90s or, 2000 or whatever it was. Didn't know much about him. I mean, there was a lot of hype behind him, obviously. They built a story around him. They built him up when he came into WCW. And he had a good run with NWA in the late 80s. Don't know a whole lot about Steve Williams other than that. Though he did, if you look at his Wikipedia, which I did turn to try and glean some info. He was unpinned in pro wrestling in North America from 87 to 97. That's a decade of being unpinned. That's an amazing stat. Until you realize, well, Steve Williams wasn't wrestling a whole lot through the 90s. In fact, he was over in Japan for most of the early 90s, and then when he was wrestling in America, it was typically for independent promotions. And then when he was in Japan, he was obviously getting pinned. He held the Triple Crown Championship for 3 months before he dropped it. So yes, while it's a notable stat, 10 years of being unpinned in America, it's really, when you kind of dig into it, it's I guess by default that he was unpinned. It wasn't like he was in, the WWF where, like a Goldberg-like streak where he went unpinned. I kind of got a good look at Steve's rear section there. He looks like an old man. He looks like he might be like a Hank Hill, where he needs butt implants for fear that when he sits down, he'll actually be sitting down on his spine. Have you ever seen that episode of King of the Hill? I think I brought this up. No, maybe I didn't bring this up before. Hilarious episode where Hank Hill has to get fake butt implants he puts in his pockets, so when he sits down, because he has no natural ass, he sits right on his spine, so the butt implants kind of help. That looks like Steve Williams. Steve Williams wearing a singlet. Nice. He's in okay shape for 43 years old. He looks like a fucking tank. You know, he's got that sort of utilitarian body shape. Alexey, though, you know, he's got a fighter's body, I will say. Not too muscular, not too soft, just right for a fighter. I know most guys like to put on glamour muscles, to show off in the ring. That's not going to help you. If you can't punch, you can't knock somebody else, you know, muscle ain't going to help that. Who's that guy next to Steve Williams at? Alexey, he looks like an unassuming regular guy, just sort of like walked in off the streets. Not much reaction from him. He looks like he just woke up. Are you okay, son? Looks like he just kind of rolled out of bed and walked into an MMA fight. You could say he's calm, collected. I say he's still half asleep. Steve Williams. Oh, come on, Steve, let's do it. I know you can do it. Let's go. Get him, Steve. Take him down. Show this Belarusian. Oh, a nice clean jab. Oh, knee right up the million, Steve. Oh, he almost falls. Steve is not looking good. He's holding on to the ropes. Oh, he takes another sharp knee. Oh, head kick. Soccer kick. A knee. Steve is done. Good in the rep. No, Steve. Oh, you broke my heart. What the fuck? Why? Oh, my God. That was expected. I am not sure what compelled Steve to take this fight, because the result of the brawl for all, which, as I noted on earlier, he got knocked out by Bart Gunn, should have been enough for Steve to realize that maybe real fighting, even though if he is a tough guy, is not exactly. He's got some blood on his neck there, obviously from Steve. He gets a trophy for beating up an old man, a pro wrestler. Yes. Whoever thought this was a good matchup? Come on. Even if this, Alexey guy, like I said, he had one prior MMA fight against Shinsuke, a no contest. Poor Steve. I feel bad for him. Fuck, the guy just, he wants to entertain the fans, he wants to do it, but this was ill-advisable unless they offered him, like, I don't know. What do you think they paid him for this? 30 grand? I couldn't see much more than that. 50 grand? I mean, at this time, K1 was still huge. Pride was huge. They weren't paying big bucks just for names anymore. They didn't need to. I mean, MMA in Japan was fucking gigantic. There was no need to pay big bucks for star power. So I can't see Steve Williams. Oh, that knee, that pretty much that broke him. I mean, he's kind of on Queer Street here. He's holding on to the ropes. He's eating knees. Bam! He kind of falls down. That kind of missed. That knee though rocked him. He's done. Like, hard to watch. I like Steve Williams. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of him, but you know what? He's one of them old grizzled American pro wrestlers. But yeah, ill-advised MMA fight here. Not sure why they put him up against a legitimate, dangerous Muay Thai kickboxer. And whoever thought it was a good idea, whoever brought this idea, was it K1? Was it Steve Williams? Was it his promoter? Maybe his connections in pro wrestling in Japan, and that's it for the video. We're all done here. Wow, that certainly was an oddity. I had actually wanted to do another pro wrestler turned MMA fight, which was Yushin Liger versus Minoru Suzuki. But I'm waiting until I have a better copy of that fight. I have a really shitty copy, and I'm expecting to be able to get a copy of the actual event, which is Spirit 8 is where that fight happened. And that way I can get, instead of just the fight, I can get more of the, the prelude into the fight, the backstage stuff that happened. So I'm waiting for that, but that was the planned next MMA oddities. Instead, I decided for this one, Steve Williams versus Alexey, and I'm trying not to say his last name because I don't want to fuck it up. Well, fight fans, what did you think of this awesome oddity fight? Was it ill-advised as I said it was? Was it a good matchup? Do you have any more information to provide as to the backstory to this fight? Let us know in the comments. Join the conversation. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't already, you assholes. And this is the most dangerous man alive today. Wishing you goodbye, good luck, and we'll sniff your fucking jerks later.